Building up or tearing down? Hi, I'm Dave Arnott, the Christian Economist. We start our story today with the Greek myth of Sisyphus. Sisyphus, if you remember, was the guy whose job was to roll a stone up a hill all day. When he returned the next day, the stone was found at the bottom of the hill. He dutifully rolled the stone up. The next day it was down. He rolled it up. The next day it was down. I have a little different take on Sisyphus than others. For me, Sisyphus is a portrayal of nature. See, if we can find out what's natural in life and what's unnatural, we'll know what we have to push up and what we allow to roll down. See, in the Christian worldview, creation, fall, redemption, that's the subject of a little blue book you'll find on my website or on Amazon called Economics in the Christian Worldview. Creation, fall, redemption. We believe the world is fallen. So we think naturally that stone rolls down the hill. It is our job as God's viceroys to roll this stone back up the hill. But first you have to decide what's natural and what's unnatural. So we believe the world is fallen. This is the key to economics, by the way. I mean, without the fall, you have no scarcity. Without scarcity, you have no economics. So the fall is at the very nature, the very beginning of all economics. There's a law in physics, the second law of thermodynamics, and it talks about how entropy takes place. As I'm talking to you today, I've got coffee in a cup here, and that coffee, the temperature is going down, meaning it is dissipating. It is going down. It is running down Sisyphus's hill. And we as humans, then, if I want that coffee to get warmer, I have to go do something to make it warmer. It's not going to get warmer on its own. See, this is a question about geopolitics. Is the world naturally peaceful? If it is, then just leave it alone, and peace will break out. Well, we know not only from our Christian worldview of the fall, but we also know from experience that that is not true. You can't leave the world alone. That's why we have a military. That's why it's become so common for you and I to say to people who've served in the military, thank you for your service. Why do we thank them? Because we assume that stone has to be rolled back up the hill. If we leave it alone, war will break out. Peace is not natural. And so this entropy refers to the idea that everything in the universe eventually moves from order to disorder. And entropy is the measurement of that change. Things naturally roll down the hill. A couple of podcasts ago, I talked about the Great Debate, and actually I kind of mistitled that one. I mistitled it No Crash Diets, a very simple title for a very in-depth podcast, because it was based on the work of Yuval Levin, his book called The Great Debate, between Thomas Paine and Edmund Burke. Both of them agreed on the American Revolution of 1776, because it's consistent with my discussion today. They were throwing off the British monarchy in the U.S. to replace it with something better. They disagreed, Paine and Burke, about the French Revolution 13 years later in 1789, because Burke's point was, you're just throwing off, you're just tearing down, you're not building anything up. Okay, so we look today at our current political situation and we ask, are we building up or are we tearing down? Well, in the State of the Union speech by President Trump last week, Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, did two things that have not been done before. Her introduction was supposed to say, it is my high honor to introduce the President of the United States. She said only the last half, the President of the United States. Then at the end of the State of the Union speech, she tore the speech publicly as a show of disrespect for the President. I'm not even saying whether she should or should not have done those things. Here's my question. In doing so, was she building up or tearing down? See, this idea of osmosis, this idea of entropy, this idea of the fall, this idea is that that stone will roll down the hill, Miss Pelosi, unless you push it back up. See, it is humans' duty, we believe as Christians, to push that ball back up, to push the stone back up. And so she did not. Dennis Prager makes much more case of this than I do. He says the left only destroys, it does not build up. That is my theme today. I'm not going as far as he does, but generally I agree with him. Look, Here's the religious. So we've talked about nature, which is Sisyphus and the stone. We talked about economics a little bit. We talked about the Christian worldview, physics, politics, religion. We believe that every action moves us either toward or away from God. I walk across the front of my economics classroom and I say, your 8th grade physics teacher did this, or physical science teacher, okay, yeah, not physics. Your 8th grade physical science teacher walked across the front of the classroom like this, and she asked you, which way am I pushing the earth? Well, if your teacher was only 120 pounds, she wasn't pushing it very far, but she was pushing it backwards, got it? Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Which way are we pushing? That's my question today, folks. Are you building up or are you tearing down? Because we believe in religion that every action takes us either toward or away from God. It either builds God's world in a way in which he desires, or it tears it down in a way in which he does not. Here's Albert Walters in Creation Regained, one of my favorite worldview books. Quote, we are called to participate in the ongoing creational work of God, to be God's helper in executing to the end the blueprint for his masterpiece, end quote. So we have to ask ourselves, are we building up or are we tearing down God's world? Here's another quote from Walters. Quote, there's something totalitarian about the claims of both Satan and Christ. Nothing in all of creation is neutral in the sense that it is untouched by this dispute between these two great adversaries, end quote. Everything we do either pushes the stone up the hill or allows it to roll down the hill. Our question is only to ask, today am I building up or am I tearing down? Let's look at life. President Trump last week was the only president in history to appear at the March for Life. Abortion. Leaving the fetus in the mother's womb pushes the stone up the hill. Allowing the fetus to be extracted from the womb in abortion lets the stone roll down the hill. Which are we doing? Look, I've done many management seminars in my lifetime. One exercise I do is about dispute resolution. And I say, okay, you've got this audience here, you've got this group, you've got this organization you're working with. You split them into half, and you can do one of two things. One is to say this group comes up with a good idea, and in devil's advocacy, the other group must strike that idea down and say what's wrong with it. That is what is currently going on in American politics. President Trump has an idea. The Democrats say that's a bad idea. Even more so, they're probably not even disagreeing with his policies. They can't disagree with economics. There's many data points for this, and I'll do a podcast later about how great the economy is. Just one this week. I'm recording this on February 7th of 2020. For 40 years, a study has been done asking people, are you better off now than you were a year ago? This week, it hit its 40-year all-time high. 59% said we're better off than we were a year ago. There are many data points. That's not my point. It's hard to disagree with President Trump's economics. It's easy to disagree with him as a person. Now, if he's a bad man, then we're all in trouble, because the assumption then is that a bad man can't do good. Well, in the Old Testament, Cyrus and Rahab did. And if we even go forward to today, if a bad man can't do good, we're in trouble, because you know what? We're all bad men and women. And so the assumption that you have to replace the man because he's bad, that's dangerous. And so back to my example that I've done in management seminars. So you've got devil's advocacy. You split the group in two and you say, you come up with an idea, you play the devil's advocate and tell us what's wrong. That's currently what's going on. You know a better way to solve that? And this is what has happened most of my life. I'm 65 years old now. And I've seen the Democrat Party and the Republican Party both propose good ideas and then argue about whose idea is best. And that's why America is one of the greatest countries in the world, because we've done what's called dialectic inquiry, which I just explained to you. Di means two. You have two opposing parties who argue who has the best plan, who has the best policy. That's the best way to solve problems, is to say, what is the competing policy? Okay? In behavior, let's look at it this way. There's something called the broken window theory of crime. Well, that idea comes from criminology, and it says that visible signs of crime, like antisocial behavior, civil disorder, those kinds of things, if you leave those alone, it will get worse. What are they stating? My very first statement to you 10 minutes ago. If you allow that ball to roll down the hill, it will. You have to push it back up. If you allow one broken window, next year you're going to have another broken window, another broken window, another broken window. Small crime leads to large crime. So all these are based on this idea of Sisyphus, meaning we as Christians, our job is to push the stone back up the hill, to overcome the fallen nature and do what we can do. Okay. When I do some public speaking, some poetry, and I recite poetry, I haven't done that on this podcast, but here's one that just is so clear today. So I'll end with the poem The Wreckers by Edgar Guest. Here it goes. I watched some men tearing a building down, a group of men in my hometown. With a heave and a hoe and a mighty yell, they swung the ball and a side wall fell. And I said to the foreman, are these men skilled, the type you'd hire if you want to build? And he smiled and laughed and said, no, indeed, a common labor is all I need. For we can tear down in a day or two what it took a builder years to do. As I turned, I shook my head. I knew there was truth in what he said, and I thought to myself as I walked away, which of these roles am I going to play? Am I a builder as I work with care, measuring life by the rule and square? Am I shaping my deeds to a well-laid plan, carefully doing the best I can? Or am I a wrecker as I walk the town, content with the labor of tearing down? The Wreckers by Edgar Guest. I'm Dave Arnott, the Christian Economist, where our motto is, fear God, tell the truth, earn a profit. See you next time.